Welcome to The Ally Effect with Allyson Blythe, authentically living life your way. We all contemplate making changes in our lives that would allow us to live more authentically, but it can be hard to take action. Allyson is here to educate, equip, and empower you with the tools you need to start authentically living life your way. Get ready to eradicate your limitations and destructive patterns as you take full responsibility for your own happiness. This show is not just talk. It is conversation for profound self-awareness, acceptance, and appreciation, the key elements to stepping into the power as the creator of your very best life. The Ally Effect with Allyson Blythe starts now.
Hey everyone, and welcome. You're listening to The Ally Effect, authentically living life your way. I'm Allyson Blythe, certified life coach and licensed clinical social worker. You can join me the first and third Thursday right here on Transformation Talk Radio as we dig deep into this concept of authenticity, covering different topics to support you in authentically living life your way. It seems odd that we would even have a show like this, a word like this, because no other species ever tries to show up as anything other than themselves. And yet in the world today, we know that it's really challenging. It's quite risky and feels vulnerable. We're going to talk about that a little bit more today. Stay with me for the next hour as we dig deep into this concept of authenticity, covering yet another topic, offering tools, tips, and techniques to educate, equip, and empower you. This is where you come to transform through practical tools and some real talk. I am incredibly excited about today. This is kind of a different opportunity, and it took some time and some conversation to pull together, because here at the Ally Effect, I have spent a lot of time covering really rich, deep topics. I do believe fully in educating, equipping, and empowering anyone I can possibly reach. And over the years in my therapy practice, I've been doing this for over 30 years. So I've worked with kids, I've worked with families, I've worked with men, women, young, old, school settings, all kinds of places, residential centers, everywhere. And it's just kind of been this experience as I've been in private practice now for over, 22 years. I have worked with a wide population. And when I had a teenager, I stopped working with teenagers, and many parents would probably understand that reality. Like, oh, it's a rough season. And as I settled further into really my practice over the years, establishing just connection and community the way that I wanted to be able to, I really found that I love working with both men and women equally. It's just such a unique experience to be able to sit with each person that comes into my office, or I now can virtually reach. And what I realize is that there are very distinct differences between men and women, needs that separate them. And the world itself is incredibly different between men and women. Now, I not only like how they perceive and interact, but certainly what's expected for them, what is permissible and allowed for each gender. Very, very different expectations, right? And I'm not trying to assume nor assign right, wrong, good, bad, easier, better. It's just different. And I want to talk about that today. Women certainly get a level of permission for things like emotion, right? Struggle, self-care, support. We're allowed very easily and safely to hug each other and embrace. We have things like book clubs and innovative women like Oprah and Glennon and certainly Brené, who are all leading thought ladies, provoking us to do this self-work, right? It's really powerful to watch them journey through. And we have things like journals and massage, retreats, mani-pedis, ladies' nights. It's just a social permission where we get to explore emotion, lean into one another, and get to have territory that certainly men do not. I am not trying to claim that this is easy for women. It certainly comes with its own social conditioning and expectation. And honestly, oftentimes a lot of discrediting that happens for women. And I'll note that because of these differences, the expectations and opportunities are incredibly different. So this has always been clear to me in my work, especially with men who I've done probably potentially hundreds, if not thousands of sessions with men over the years. I have seen them in couple sessions, individual sessions, groups, coaching, therapy, again, all the way back 30 plus years. This realization that I've certainly learned a thing or two, sitting in that many sessions, having that many conversations and interactions. And I have to be honest, I fell off the tracks a little while back with a client I'll talk about named Craig. He was really struggling in a lot of different aspects of his life. He's in the financial industry, and he's really have an established career, but kind of a lot of changes and expectations that were happening for him career wise, a new marriage, a divorce situation, parenting, blended family issues, and absolutely conflict with his family of origin. It was just situations pained him deeply, and he thought about them a lot. And of course, over many years of doing this work, I have further developed my work about empaths. I've talked about that a lot. And I'm pretty in tune with people who are in tune with that level of emotion and energy. And I could almost immediately detect that Craig was very empathically wired. I could sense it. And it was a part of his dilemma was understanding why he struggled the way he did, why he felt things that other people didn't really seem to feel. He did react strongly to things. He would invest heavily. He felt very, very deeply the things that happened in the world, and he took things straight to heart. That caused a lot of problems. He was confused, and he was really hurt oftentimes when people didn't reciprocate that, nor even really feel similarly to it. Because his feelings were hurt, things weighed heavily on him. His thought process was really kind of thick and complicated in there. And these things had just started to take their toll, which is what landed him in my office. And for me, this is kind of common day conversation, not really that big of a deal. I could detect the empathic wiring that he had. And in my attempt to acknowledge his experience and really validate for him, I just kind of casually said to him, "You experience the world so deeply because you're so sensitive." Oh, as soon as the words left my mouth, I know better, right? I knew that I had misstepped. I had not handled that word nor the description of it with the tenderness or the respect that it really deserves, especially with the male population. I saw it in his face the second I said it, and it was as though I had struck him. I mean, it was just so significant, his recoil with that. And he quickly began to kind of stir in his chair and kind of get defensive as I could see his energy changing. And immediately, before he could even speak, I just interrupted. And I said, knowing that it was absolutely my misstep in not wanting him to feel any need to justify, defend, explain, none of it. I also knew, unfortunately, that was really too late for that. I explained to him that in my world, in my office, in my practice, words like sensitive, tender, empath, emotion, these were all strengths and actually character assets, not defects. And it took him some time to kind of settle in and settle back down to restore himself to any kind of sense of peace. And I felt terrible about the way that that went. And yet at the same time, it opened a door of powerful exploration for us to kind of have this deeper conversation and move into a different avenue to help him look at how he had gotten these messages about the word sensitive and where that stigma had come from and how sharp it landed. He was absolutely born a natural athlete, and he just was so kind of gifted and talented in everything he did. And so his path was pretty clear. His family was very successful. They were very wealthy with a family business. And the expectations were clear from the time he was a little boy, from sports to income to career to college. The teams that he performed in were all state and even national champions. And the path was paved with really little any input or opinion from Craig, his alma mater, the family business laying in wait for him. His family, his classmates, teammates, all of the people that he would call his friends really didn't understand why the heck he was so serious all the time, why he was so sensitive to things. And they gave him a hard time, a really hard time. He was ridiculed, made fun of, and called names. by the people he felt like he should be able to be closest to. He spent a lot of his life trying to force himself into those roles, behaviors, those relationships that just really didn't fit. He reacted strongly and was plagued by this sense that something was fundamentally wrong with him, because no matter how much he tried, he always went through life heart first and didn't always fit into what was expected of him. Craig and I still work together to this day. My office is his emotional sanctuary, where he gets to kind of fuss and fight and fury however he needs to process through the emotions he's experiencing, learning to understand the guide and the way his intuition and empathic wiring is actually a gift and an asset to understand how impacted he's been by these roles, this ridicule, the expectations, and being able to interact in the world with others that doesn't always grant men much permission to have room for feelings. And so his work with me is slow and steady, because my place is the only place where he has to, in order to lean into those emotions and explore them, to experience the vulnerability and the emotional tenderness that he absolutely does not dare venture into, certainly not in the business industry, not with his family, and definitely not with his college buddies that he had always spent so much time with. For now, this is the best he's got, and that's okay, because today is my appeal to all of the Craigs in the world, to men who've grown up in a world where emotions are taken as weakness, vulnerability, susceptibility. We have a little bit of, not a little bit, we've got disdain almost for men's emotion in general to any man, not even empathically wired. And I assure you that this is your place for learning, exploring, and yes, even especially for feeling. It's normal, it's safe, it's necessary, and it's quite frankly just human, right? Today, I have the privilege to welcome two guests, two gentlemen who have made the commitment to do this work, to show up in the world, to take the risk, to be seen, and to explore that emotional terrain. The men who have recognized their gifts and their capabilities and sat through the discomfort of emotion, the labels and the judgments, the misrepresentation and the misunderstandings to get to the other side. We're going to talk a lot about this today, just kind of see where the road leads as a special offering for men. And women, I encourage you, please stay tuned. My guess is, as I have over the years, you're likely to learn a thing or two, and maybe even shifting your perspective and your lens about the men who are in your life. Because we often want men to be very readily available for our emotion. We want them to know how to understand them, read them, validate them, acknowledge them, and yet we rarely do the same for them. My hope is that you'll hear something and learn something today that allows you to have some deeper insight and perspective about the male wiring and what society has felt like to them. We do need to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to welcome two guests to the show today for a deep dive conversation. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back here on the Ally Effect. I'm Allyson Blythe, certified life coach and licensed clinical social worker. Authentically living life your way sounds actually a lot easier than it really is. And so I want to make sure before we venture too far, you know how to be in touch with me. You can call me on my good old-fashioned landline, 859-341-7773. If you want to check out my website, just to kind of get some feels about what's going on in my world, AllysonBlythe.com, and my email is AllysonBlythe@live.com. If you need a social media boost and just want to keep track of kind of some positivity and what's happening, it's Allyson Blythe Life Coach. So I am excited to see where the road leads today. I've got a general idea of what we might talk about, but you just really never know what's going to happen. I'm welcoming two guests, two gentlemen who have really committed to do the work that I was just referring to. Two men who've decided to show up in the world and had the courage to explore this inner world that we all have, that the world doesn't grant a lot of permission, not the same way for whatever men are up against. Courage to take the risk and expose some of that vulnerability, which can be incredibly scary. And so today I want to welcome both Tim and Don. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for having
Thanks
us.
for having us.
Absolutely. So today, take a breath, right? Let's just see what happens because it's a public forum and it feels a little bit scary. We're all talking about that. And I wonder if you can share as much or as little as you want to. What is it that called you to do this work, to show up in the world and really explore some of this inner world? Like was there a crisis? Was there an event? What happened in your world?
I'll
I
go
could go
first.
first.
Go
So,
right ahead.
all right. For me, I was met with a big life event a few years ago where I found myself in a surprise separation from my wife of over a decade, and it got me to take a look within and start trying to understand the things that I did to contribute to that like big life change where was I asleep at the switch all this time, and that big surprise. So I found a bunch of different men's organizations as well as some emotional organizations, yourself, Allyson included. And I really just, in an effort to understand my contributions to the steps towards divorce that were happening, it was that whole panic mode that kind of set it in motion. So,
Yep, kind of a crisis point that brought you to that.
Absolutely.
Yep, not uncommon. How about for you, Tim?
Mine is pretty much the same. I was facing a troubled marriage and to start with, and it brought me to Allyson, and I just started this journey with her. And my journey ended up with a divorce, but I just kept going because it started to, like Donna said, I wanted to see where I contributed. Where did I go wrong? And then once the divorce, it's like, well, who am I now? Trying to find out who you really are, because when you're in a marriage and family, you're a husband, you're all these things. And when that was gone, it was like, well, who am I now? I was given different permission than I felt like beforehand.
Yeah. So true. You kind of play these roles for a really long time and it begins to define you. And like you said, kind of asleep at the wheel, just going through the motions or doing what's socially defined, what you believe to be the right thing. And when it leads you to this crisis point, you're kind of like, what the heck do I do now? What happened and what do I do? So both of you, that's kind of cool. Both of you coming to this point in your lives where you're like, I want to look at me. I need to take some responsibility. And one of the tools I talk a lot about is self-honesty, like getting really raw and real with myself so that I can look at how I've contributed to this place where I am. Awesome. I'm wondering about, again, the courage to do this inner work, and both of you having the courage to do that, venture into this terrain. Did you get messages growing up about being a man, what's expected of you, any specific things that stick out, either lessons or experiences you had that kind of shaped your perspective about what was expected, either in these roles or what to do or not to do with emotion? And maybe just for the sake of convenience, we'll go from Don to Tim, we'll call on you.
Awesome. Yeah, for me, I mean, this was a big message, and I know a lot of men can relate. We always heard boys don't cry, whether it's physical pain or whether, there's an event that's happening that makes you sad, or, just that, like, it's denying yourself the permission to emote. And it was that simple. I mean, from a very young age, I think we all hear that boys don't cry. So it's kind of rammed down our throats when we're very young.
Yep. Boys don't cry, toughen up. Yeah. Okay. How about for you, Tim?
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Like he said, boys don't cry. Hey, wipe it off, walk it off, toughen up. You do get that message and you get that role. You don't really want to show weakness. You don't want to show those vulnerable sides. You as a young boy growing up, you don't see your dads cry. They were always the tough ones. And so you do get this message early of what it looks like or what you perceive it to look like, especially growing up with me. And, in that era of the 70s and the 80s, it was different than now. Things are different now. So just that tough message.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-permission, this idea that you did not have permission growing up, because if anything, and Tim, you even just said this, it was associated with weakness, and that there's something wrong with you, or that you're not handling it right. And if you're wired as emotionally as I know you two gentlemen are, kind of this idea of like, wait a minute, stop doing that. It's like, stop breathing. You're like, I don't know how. And so you have all of these emotions. Did you find that they kind of came out sideways in some ways? I know even for me, if I don't deal with it, it will absolutely come out sideways, maybe with aggression, sarcasm, something. Do you ever find that kind of in your earlier coping that your emotions kind of came out in different types of ways that were not healthy?
Yeah, for me, I think emotions coming out, it's kind of like imagining yourself hanging from monkey bars, and over time, eventually you're gonna fall.
Yeah.
So there's the idea of, taking the opportunity to do it in a graceful way, or hanging on and hanging on and hanging on until you can't anymore. And all of a sudden, like you said, it comes out sideways, or it's this eruption that you have no control over. And it's not going to happen at a convenient time. And, you can create a lot of damage to the people around you. And it's the whole idea of reprogramming yourself with that permission to do that when it comes, as it comes, and get it out hard and fast before it becomes an inconvenience to everyone, or damaging.
You both have brought up some really good points. One is programming, and Tim, you just identified like the generational impact and messages that we get, and the idea of what's treated as normal, and there's this script or these expectations for kids. And I love the kind of monkey bar analogy that it's going to happen eventually. Like it's not healthy for people to just continue to stuff down in the way that you maybe saw emotion role modeled, conflict role modeled, even intimacy. Like if you are struggling, or there's even a celebration about something, it's not just what we might deem as bad emotions. It's even kind of like celebration, that men don't have a lot of permission to feel either end of the scope. So yeah, cool. Good thoughts. Tim, how about for you? Coming out sideways?
No, of course. I mean, like Don said, and like you said, I just remember really squishing everything down, just keeping everything inside as much as possible. Just I was given permission because my parents did get divorced, and I live with my mom, and she would always be on me to open up and to talk. So she tried to give me that permission, but being an empath, some of the things that you feel, you're afraid that it's going to hurt that person, or it's not right to feel these things, or it's not right to think these things. So it was more scary to speak it than it was to keep it down. That was when you're a kid, you avoid, or I avoided any type of conflict. Hell, I still do. So so you just keep pressing it down, and yeah, it comes out sideways. It comes out when you least expect it. It comes out everywhere. It's messy.
Yeah, it really is. Don, did you want to say anything else about that?
No, I think we're good. Yeah,
Okay.
I fully agree. Yeah, we're Tim is with that.
Yeah. You kind of made a perfect segue into kind of the next issue is like, do you identify yourself as a big feeler? Tim, you use the word empath. I talk a lot about that on this show. Do you identify yourself as a big feeler in this world? And if so, what's that really been like for you?
Uh, for me, well, you're the one that taught me it. I really didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know it was real.
Mhm.
So for the majority of my life, I just thought I was oversensitive or whatever however you want to call it. I didn't know this was a real thing because it can, for me, it can take over. It can, it can be so scary and such a crazy feeling that you'll do. It's like a fear because it's like, it's easier to not say or to not let my emotions out than it is to let them out and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and
But
especially
I've
like,
with you, I've learned that it's okay, and you know that you can do it, and it's safe, and you need to, and you've given me that permission. So
yeah,
with that
good.
permission, it's changed a lot of things.
Good, very good. So kind of feeling like that opens up other avenues for you to be able to explore and be more of yourself. I mean, the show is about authenticity. So with that permission ticket and understanding, it's a classic empath question of what's wrong with me. So many people come into my office riddled with this sense of like, there's really something fundamentally wrong with me. And I think you kind of struggled with that and you could pick up and absorb so much from the time you were very little. So it's interesting. You did have a little more understanding of emotion, permission with emotion, but because you felt all of the feels of other people, you were like, I can't afford to go there. You were not only experiencing your own, but other people's too.
Yes, very
That's a
true.
lot. That's a lot for a grown human, much less a little human. So yeah. How about for you, Don?
Oh, pretty much exactly the same. I know and I knew at an early age that I was a deep feeler. And like you said, being restricted from actually emoting that stuff, it really it's a very lonely place to be because the only time you get to actually feel or express any of those emotions are either when you are alone or on the inside. And after going through this transition where I began to wake up emotionally and became able to express it, for me it was really like a huge arrival of this self that was always there. So it was pretty amazing for me.
Yeah, it's like this awakening. It's a permission ticket, and then like this awakening that you get to venture. And even that can be really scary, just kind of like it's like somebody turns all the lights on, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's so bright in here. There's so much. And I think for both of you, just this wealth of emotion and stuff that goes on. Do you remember from the time you were young or even later in life, maybe in your marriages, was there an experience that shaped you that kind of I know for me there were two things specifically that I wrote about and misunderstood. One is when I was just being very, very playful and kind of giddy and doing my thing as a real little kid. I was called a show off by a grown up, and that squashed an element with my sensitivity. Like seriously, like hurt my feelings. And because no one else spoke up, I had the sense within the entire environment that there was something wrong with me. Another one was when I was with friends and I followed the crowd, right, and went against myself, and then was really chastised by my friends for doing the same thing. It's such little teeny tiny elements, and yet the impact are so profound. Do you have a moment like that or a situation that you experienced that really impacted you in that same way about your emotions or your coping?
Yeah, for me, a couple as well. I remember at 4 years old, my mom was sick with cancer, and she, for a 4 year old to even begin to understand what's going on there, my parents, my grandparents, nobody was able to tell me what was going on. But the event that I remember the most about it is being left with my grandparents for an extended amount of time so my mom could get surgery. And not knowing any of that, I felt like I had done something bad,
Oh, wow.
and I was kind of like being rejected by my mom.
Mm.
And I tried to bring that to my grandmother, and she basically just fully dismissed it, like you're not old enough to understand any of what's going on, and really like restricted my permission to talk about it or have anything to say or question it. So that, that was a big event for me. And then the other one was just, and this is for many kids, being on the school bus
Oh,
and seeing how the older kids treated the younger kids when they showed a vulnerable state. And
oh,
even though it wasn't a big event for me, experiencing that through other kids, it made me very quiet, and I always tried to be invisible.
yeah. Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah. It's such a typical life experience, and that's why it's so easy to miss. But the impact is so profound. It's like a belief system became solidified in your mind and in your heart of what to do and what not to do. And the way other people, you bring up a great point, not only our own internal conclusions, but also the external support or lack of support. It's a dismissal or an invalidation that happens. Oh, don't worry about it. Oh, knock it off. Stop that. You're too young. Don't, it doesn't even matter. Like an invalidation that happens to someone with such a huge experience. It was your mom and kind of the idea of the situation. So you can recognize things like that started to imprint as a very, I mean, you said 4 years old, some of this stuff started for you.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Tim?
I'm like Don. I've had quite a few things. One of my major things, of course, is when my parents got divorced. And I was an only child. My mother had some issues, mental type issues, and I was very close to my mom, very, very close. I definitely was a mama's boy, I guess you'd say, and that impacted me. It impacted me because, and for years, I guess as I got older, I tried to dismiss it, how much it really did impact me. But I understand it more. But it was hard because it's your parents and they split up, and you, being the way I was, a big feeler, you want both of them to be happy, and it's hard because you're the only one. I didn't have any brothers, so when I would go with my dad, my mom was alone, and it was hard because I was being pulled and felt like I was being pulled in two different directions, and trying to just keep everything that in my head as normal as possible. And it seemed to be a lot. And like I said, my mom had issues, and it just added to it because the sadness that she carried, I could just always feel. Yeah. And it was hard. It was hard on me, and it impacted me.
Was there another event, or was that specifically the one that you
That one's the biggest one. And I'm like Don, in school, you could start seeing the difference of how you're treated with emotions and how you're treated with, kids are cruel. I can, if you have your own kids and you look back, you're like, wow, kids can be really cruel, and it's not it's not always intentional, but it can be very impactful to you, and it's very hard.
Yeah. It shapes, it does impact. And so if you're getting it at home, or if you're experiencing some of that with just everyday things that happen, it doesn't even have to be a horribly abusive or huge experience. It just, kids will take pieces of information and shape them into their reality. And then we become big people, trying to have careers and kids and marriages and all these kinds of things with no awareness or coping mechanisms, no permission. And really this understanding of what is it that's going on inside of me. Yeah, it's really profound to understand some of those pieces. It's not a blame game. It's not, this experience of like, oh, this happened and it was horrible because, and it creates this victim ticket. It's really it's like puzzle pieces, putting them together to understand the big picture so that you can decide differently and understand how it shaped you, so that you can then recreate that lens of how you want to be in the world. Yeah. What do you wish you could have known, would have known? Or another version of that is, what would you offer to someone who, just a little person, a little guy, like kind of what would you offer to him as a way of like teaching him or role modeling something different for him?
Want me to go?
Go ahead,
Sure.
Don, you're first.
Okay. I think the major thing is, coming from being a big time like pleaser, where I thought that worked really well in helping me to navigate life, whether it was with school, with relationships, with conflict. Being a pleaser doesn't work. And, over time, your truth is going to come out, and you're better off, like, just with that word authenticity that you brought up before, like, just to be that right out of the gate, because anything outside of that, if you're trying to please people and you're making sacrifices for yourself just to try to perpetuate the situation you're in because out of fear, it doesn't work. It's way better just to say what you mean what you say, and express how you feel right out of the gate.
I offer a course called the Dishonoring Peas, and basically it's exactly what you just said. It's this performance mode that I think most of us, regardless, fall into or are taught. We learn to do what's expected of us and to perform in ways that get us attention, approval, acceptance, get us on the team, get us the girl, whatever it might be. Or just even kind of a pat on the back and like a look of approval. It's so important, and kids need it, but ways that they learn to perform in order to get that. And it's so inauthentic. It's so disingenuous because it's not based on really who they are. And also I was thinking about this when Tim was talking. I think for many of the roles that are expected, there's an element of caretaking, providing, like you're the one who is responsible. And whether it's you're responsible for the situation, you're responsible for the person or the emotion of the person. I mean, that's a huge responsibility. And so kind of your input it really is that. It's kind of like, it's very good, Don. It's like authentically living life your way. It's kind of, you just really need to learn to practice and familiarize yourself with who you really are, because performance mode, perfecting, all of that, it just pleasing, those are all the P's. Those don't work and don't get you kind of healthy, substantial relationships. Yeah. Okay, Tim?
I agree totally with that, but I guess if I'm talking about like a little version, I think I would offer the hope that there's other people out there to help you. I was very bad about not, and I still am, asking for help. And sometimes everyone needs to ask and to have a voice and ask for help and ask for guidance. And that's the big thing I would offer someone, is that there's plenty of help out there. There's plenty of people that will listen. There's plenty of people that can make you feel not alone, because I know going through this at times you do feel alone. Like you've said it before, like there's no one else like me. There's nothing else like me. But through you and through other avenues, you start finding out, hey, there are other people. I can work through this. I can make a difference. I can be different. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's what I'd offer, just the guidance that there's other people out there, that you're not alone.
Yeah, I just got all these pictures in my head as you were talking. I was thinking about the Lone Ranger, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Clint Eastwood, all of these people that we like, John Wayne, like all of these male role models. And it's like, hold on, wait a minute, like asking for help, it's like they've got guns blazing, all this different kind of stuff of what's really expected. And so it's another example that it's such a message of what's expected in term and what's like the right thing as a man, and to really be able to lean into social support, or heaven forbid, somebody like me, a professional, to lean into that. I would imagine that feels scary, really vulnerable and susceptible. And again, maybe even wrong. Did you get any messages? Like, were you ever told directly about anything we talked about kind of those messages, but like anything about getting help? Were you ever told anything about that?
It's you, Tim.
Oh, okay. Not directly, but you do get that feel. You get,
Yeah, sure.
you kind of, you, like you said, you've been grown up with all these role models and thing. And when you say, hey, I'm going to go search for help, or I'm going to go talk to such and such, everybody's like, you can't handle that on your own.
Yeah.
You can't take care of that by yourself. And so you do kind of get that feel, but it's like you've done it for so long. When you find that, it's like a relief, and it makes it easier to move forward.
Yeah, I was saying in the intro that I have a gentleman who very similar experiences what you guys experienced is, and he calls my office his emotional sanctuary, right? Like it's just his place to be able to do some of that work. Anything you want to say about that, Don?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of kids, they don't want to be a burden. Or they feel like if they ask for help, they ask for assistance, or they say maybe they're not able to handle or manage something, they feel like they're putting the burden of whatever that is on who they're asking. And, at some point, there was probably an event in their development that made them feel that way, oh, I don't have time for that, or whatever that looks like. But it's that, if I ask, if I look for help, I'm going to be perceived as a burden, and I don't want to put that on anybody else. I think that's a major thing for a lot of kids.
Okay. And especially if you're feeling the weight from illness to divorce, if you're feeling the weight of a parent's or a caretaker's emotion and stress. I mean, kids can detect, we talk about kids are so resilient. They don't know. Kids know, infants know, they can sense and they can detect. If you're empathically wired, you've got the spidey senses going off all over the place. So to realize like all of the social conditioning that's expected of you, but also just the feels inside. Like, I don't want to add one more thing to my parents' plate in order to somehow make them responsible. I don't want to be a burden. Yeah.
Very true.
If you could maybe, what's a win? Like, who are you now? How is life now for you? You're kind of on the other side. You've come through the dark side. Like, what's life like for you now to experience more authentically, more emotionally?
Well, for me, it's been such a game changer for me, and it really, like, I feel like, the Technicolor was turned on. I feel like I went from black and white TV to, experiencing life in full color, 3D. It made me want to, like, kind of spread that to other people, and to help other people kind of wake up in that way. And so, I began to train to do the same for other men. And I also, because, I'm in law enforcement, I got involved in a program I actually helped found this program for people who experience trauma in the workplace to, kind of get debriefed on the situation, and, to offer them help in that way and how to deal with it. Because, once you add that, that other expectation of how a law enforcement officer is supposed to perform on top of, all of the other things that are expected of us, there's a huge chance that the person's going to shut down. So for me, I just feel like it gave me the opportunity to actually help others to wake up in the way that I have, which is really amazing.
It's like the gift that just keeps on giving, because you now have your own emotional awareness and permission. So you can you see the other side, you recognize what life was like before and how many consequences there were and how much pain there was because of that. Now you're like, wait, I promise there is another way. And especially the gift of being with someone and aligning with someone in trauma, that they don't have to. I mean, you want to talk about points of impact. I mean, I would imagine, especially in your industry, trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's you just want to shout it at the mountaintops at how great it is to live a life free of all those suppressed childhood trauma and all
Yeah.
of it. So, pretty
Well,
awesome.
and that's why this is so important. It's why I wanted to be in a visible format for people to actually see. You're real people. It's not just me talking to them about all the work men can do. It's like we've got two real life examples of how life can be different. How about for you, Tim?
Um, I'm like Don. I haven't. I'm living my best life. It's
Yeah.
the best way you could say it. It gives you a lot more freedom. It gives you a lot more permission. Is the thing I guess I'm taking away from it. It gives you a lot more permission to be way more authentic and to be able to lead, not feel bad about being kind and polite and nice and looked down upon, and or it's authentic for me, and uh, it's made it easier. It's
Mhm.
made life a lot more fresher. You get the sky looks bluer. It's nice. It's been fun,
Yeah.
and it's still going. That's the thing, is that you think you're done. I don't think you're really ever done. That's the
Right. Yeah, it's what I wanted to say is that this is such a process. It's not like probably either of you hit the floor running. It was like all sunshine and roses the next day or the next week or maybe even the next year. My many, many years ago, when I was in some of the heart of my work, one of my dearest girlfriends said to me, "Stay the course." And I've said that to probably hundreds of clients, stay the course. And I would recommend that when it gets hard, lean into people, know that there's opportunity that's available. Don, if somebody is curious about reaching you and maybe having questions about either your industry or more about your men's coaching, how can they be in touch with you?
Well, I have a website for the men's emotional program. It's called the Power Calls. It's thepowercalls.com. And then also the traumatic event support services for law enforcement and first responders. The best way to get in touch with me is through my email, which is donmetcalf@gmail.
Yeah.
It's actually, I'm sorry, I have to correct that. It's Don Metcalf Jr., Jr.
Oh,
at Gmail.
okay.
I
Very
want to
good.
send it to my dad.
Yeah. Gentlemen, before we wrap up for the day, is there anything else you want to share? Just another tidbit or two?
Yeah, I'll go. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, Allison, and it's also awesome to meet you, Tim. And it's so cool that I feel like our society in general is normalizing this sort of self-development.
Mhm.
And it's just really a breath of fresh air to get together with other people that are doing the same thing. And I really appreciate that opportunity.
Very cool. Thank you. Anything for you, Tim?
Yeah, the same. I'd like to thank Don and you, Allison. I'm honored and happy to be here, and feel great to be able to be on a platform of where you can talk about this stuff. It's like Don said, it's nice to be able to talk about this stuff now and to get it out.
Good. I applaud your courage. I applaud your journey. It's been an honor to be part of that, as however I have been. And I can't wait to see where the road leads, just kind of knowing that kind of what was and also what is possible. And so I want to thank you for tuning in. And I don't often ask this, but I am absolutely going to ask this. Please share this episode. We see clearly the impact, the social training, the role modeling, points of trauma, all of that. I think this message needs to spread. And if you would be willing to share this, I think it's going to have a profound impact for hopefully current generations and even future generations. I am Allyson Blythe. If you want to be in touch with me, Allyson Blythe at live.com. Any questions, any feedback, I would absolutely love to hear. I'm open to that and always willing to learn and have conversation. If you need to follow this on social media, Allyson Blythe, Life Coach. And stay with me as we venture into a couple more topics before we wrap up the series of the Ally Effect. It's been a profound journey today. Thank you so much. This is the Ally Effect, authentically living life your way. I am Allyson Blythe, certified life coach and licensed clinical social worker. I will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ally Effect with Allyson Blythe. The moment you decide to take control of your own well-being, you start the journey of authenticity. Tune in next time for more empowering conversations and practical tools to help you shed your fear, worry, comparison, and less than beliefs. Stick with us as you step into the driver's seat and head off onto the road of success and happiness. Your best life awaits.